Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I'm super duper excited to be here with you today. We're just gonna start. We're just gonna jump right in with a little story. So I was in my car earlier today on my way to the gym. And, I have to put something in my console. And when I was looking in my console, I see down in there two things that I get very excited. So down in my console, I keep, there's a couple of things in there, but two of the things that I keep in there is one is I have a Swiss Army knife, a Swiss Army little toolkit tool thing. And then I also have a Leatherman. So when I was a kid, I loved Swiss Army knives. Like it double amen hands if you can relate, right? I was a wicked tomboy. I loved like GI Joes and like all the stuff that people would say like quote unquote the boys like. Like I think everybody can like everything. I'm just saying this is what we called it back in the day, right? So when I was a kid, I loved Swiss Army knives. And then later in the 80s, they came out with a called Leatherman, like Leatherman craft tools. And what I loved about these things is that they were multi-purpose units, right? That they were multi-tools. And what I realized is, so like, for example, the Swiss Army knife is kind of built around the knife. But some of the Swiss Army knives also have screwdrivers and they have little things for like digging into stuff and threading things. They have corkscrews, right? And then the Leatherman is built more around like pliers. And then it has these multi things around them. So you can like pop open and there's a screwdriver. You can pop open, there's like little mini scissors, right? So like everything you need is like built into these little things. And when I was thinking about these multi tools and what really resonated with me is I love the idea that in one little thing you could totally expand your toolkit. And when I started to think about human beings, right? My sweetie and I were talking about this the other day. And I was thinking about human beings. What happens so often is that people do not expand their toolkit. They don't expand the tools in their toolkit. And another way of saying that is that they don't expand their perspectives, right? And we'll get into all of that in a minute. So I want to get into this idea of why it's important that we expand our quote unquote toolkit or our set of tools. And it goes back to this quote that maybe you have heard. Now, people have attributed these quotes to like different people, like Mark Twain, whatever. Mark Twain, there's actually like no proof that he ever said this. But the reason why we don't want to have a small toolkit is because it really limits how we not only see the world, but how we respond to the world. It changes how we see problems and solutions, and it changes how we interact with other human beings in our relationships, right? So Abraham Maslow said, so back in 1966, a guy named Abraham Maslow said this in The Psychology of Science. He says this, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to treat everything as if it were a nail. Another way that this got said around the same time is it says, if one has a hammer, one tends to look for nails. So we can already see how only having one tool, it limits your scope not only of problem solving, but it limits your perspective. If the only thing you have is the hammer, everything not only starts to look like nails, like that's the tool you need to use, but you'll start to look for nails. You'll start to look for problems that maybe don't even exist. And then Abraham Kaplan, who was a professor of philosophy at UCLA, he also said this back in the 60s, something very similar. And this is called the Kaplan's Law of the Instrument. It's also sometimes called the first law of the instrument. And this is what it states. He says, give a boy a hammer and everything he meets has to be pounded. Another way that this has been kind of paraphrased is this. I did research. You guys know I always look shit up. I do. Like I love words. I love like phrases and quotes and getting to the happy, like the origin story of stuff. So another way that this has been said is this. If you give a boy a hammer, he suddenly finds that everything needs pounding. Think about that. Let's just hit boop, boop. Let's hit the pause button for a second and think about this. If you have only one tool, You start to see everything through the lens of this is the solution for everything. And if this is the only thing you have, you think that's the only way to view things through, right? And so it becomes very limiting. And I'm going to apply this in a broader perspective in a moment. So here's the thing. If you only have a hammer, that's all you'll ever use. And you don't even sometimes know that there are other options or other ways or other tools out there. So, one of the things that is deeply, deeply required, and I cannot say this enough, is you must be a person who has curiosity. Now, I'm just going to go out there and say this, and this might make me sound mean or judgmental or a jerk or whatever, but I really, really do feel this deeply. I find people who have a lack of curiosity so excruciatingly dull. People who are not interested in other human beings, people who aren't interested in other points of view, people who aren't interested in learning, people who aren't interested in hearing the story, people who don't want to know what it's like to stand in another person's shoes, people who don't want to understand another person's perspective. Like, if you're not curious, one of the things that I have said to my yoga students for a gazillion years, and I say it to people in the nest, I say it to people in my yoga classes, I say it to people in mentoring and in my writing, write club. I do writing workshops every month. The number one thing that I tell them is you must be curious. If you are not curious, oh my God. I see it so often too as a podcaster. I see people who interview other human beings and they are just not curious enough. They just ask the same old questions that everybody asks. They don't get under the under. They don't lean in. They don't ask people about themselves. And you also see this in bad dates, on bad dates, when the other person, all they do is talk about themselves and they don't ask you a single thing about yourself. And I also see this. There's so much suffering that I have seen with humans I have worked with in relationship to their families. And they'll say to me, like, think about like their siblings, their parents, their people, their quote unquote people. And they'll say, they never ask me about myself. And I'm like, they don't ask you about yourself because they've already decided who they think you are. They slapped a bunch of labels on you. They put you in the boxes of their own making. They've decided that this is who you are. And you could be 6 months later, 6 years later, 60 years later, and they just have lost all curiosity about you, for you, towards you, whatever. And it is just lazy and it's dull and it's uninspiring. And if that makes me an asshole, I guess that's what I am because I just do not understand now why people have a lack of curiosity about other people's humanities and stories and why they are the way that they are and why they think that and why they do that. I mean, I just think like, oh my God, you cannot be a writer and a storyteller. You cannot be a good teacher. I don't think you can be a good coach. I don't think you can be a good mentor or a good therapist or even a good parent for that matter. If you're not leaning into it and trying to get more tools in your toolkit for understanding the other humans and animals and world around you. So, how, like, again, think about it. If all you have is a hammer, but the person or the problem or the situation requires needle nose tweezers, then you're fucked. And the person that you're dealing with is also fucked because if you only have a hammer when the situation, the person, the whatever requires a little bit more tenderness or mercy or compassion or quiet or care or whatever, then damage will be done. You will end up leaving a mark. And one of the ways that I saw this, I'll never forget. So here I am, like a total masshole, right? I grow up in Lawrence, Mass. I go to BU. I live in Boston for 5 years, whatever. And then I move out to LA. That's a longer story for another. I would say read the book, read the memoir when it comes out. But it was so, it was so mind blowing to me. Like my experience in Los Angeles and LA and California when I look back to what my life was like in Lawrence and in Boston and stuff like that, I would not be the same person that I am. I've said this before about my mother too. I'm like, if my mother hadn't been killed, like if my mother didn't die when I was younger, I don't think I'd be the same person that I am today. And I can tell you 100% straight up facts. I would not be the same person I am today if I hadn't left home, gotten the fuck out of Masshole City, right? And you know me, I love being a little masshole. Hashtag evolves masshole, right? But to leave my roots, to leave my quote unquote people, to leave the family, and to move 3,000 miles away to the opposite coast, right? I went from the Northeast to the Southwest, you know? It's like, what a total different experience. And I remember, like, it was so fascinating because my sweetie has talked about this too, because he's a kid that grew up in Dover, New Hampshire, and same thing. He moved out to LA. We were both out in LA at the same time, probably circling around each other. Our paths didn't cross, although we're convinced that we were in the same places at the same time, but just didn't know each other. But he too also says, like, when we were out there, like people who were local, like local native Californians, a lot of times it's like they didn't get the sarcasm. They didn't get the harshness. They didn't get the like teasing as a form of affection, right? It was just like foreign to them. It was like, what is this, right? And they didn't always understand like the East Coast. And I often say, I'm an East Coast kid. Like I'm an East Coast kid with like a West Coast sensibility in a lot of ways. Because being in Burbank, being in Montecito and Santa Barbara with Marianne, right? Marianne Williamson, being down in San Diego, like just being on the West Coast and experiencing their point of view, like experiencing Hollywood, experiencing like all the movie stars, experiencing the glam and the grit, experiencing just the level and depth of you know, a lot of people like, oh, the Californians are crazy. It's all woo woo out there. But I will tell you, the spiritual experiences, the spiritual exposure that I got in California, I would not be the same person. So if you're somebody who finds themselves always reaching for the hammer, and let's just think about this. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say that when you get into an argument with your sweetie, you guys fall into your patterns because you don't have any tools. So one of you starts slamming shit or slamming doors or whatever, and the other one does the silent treatment. And like that's your MO. The only way that you need to, the only way that you seem to have to show your dissatisfaction, your unhappiness, your annoyance, your anger, whatever, is that you stop speaking to your partner. And somebody was telling me the other day, they're like, oh yeah, I've known people who they don't talk. They live in this little space, this little apartment, and they haven't talked to each other in 2 weeks. And I just think like, what the fuck is that? Like, what does that look like? Right. And I'm not judging those people, but what it usually tells me is they don't have more tools in their toolkit for finding out how to express or sharing how they feel with the other person. Right. Let's say that your immediate tool is like anger, like you don't have any other way of like expressing yourself. Again, when all you have is a hammer, everything and everybody starts to look like a nail that needs to get pounded. So it limits us. It limits our ability to respond appropriately. And again, let's say something, you know, needs a screwdriver, but all you have is a chisel. Like that's not going to work. So it's so important that we learn how to expand our toolkit to get different tools. And we could also apply this to ourselves with ourselves. Like, let's say that you're somebody who has panic attacks or somebody who gets anxious or somebody who has whatever. It's really, really helpful to be able to have different things in your toolbox, like breathing exercises, or knowing that you can take something cold and put it on the back of your neck, or put cold water on your face, or knowing that you could hum like some sounds to help your vagus nerve, or knowing that you could suck on a super sour candy because that will pull you in, knowing that you could do EFT tapping or bilateral stimulation or 1,000 other tools. But you have to be curious enough and have a strong enough desire to want to help yourself that you learn those things. And some very simple things that you can do, because I get it, right? Me leaving Lawrence and going to Boston and being at Boston University around kids who came from such different lives than me. Kids who had so much money, whose parents were like, they didn't have the money, their parents had the money, right? Kids who had famous parents, kids who just came from different religions and backgrounds and all kinds of stuff. Like that was another like the door swung open on my life and I was able to meet people from the Midwest and I was able to meet like Jewish friends and I was able to be exposed to people who were from Ghana. Like I mean my whole world was just woo, just like grew in size, right? And then moving to California, that it did that too, right? All the experiences I got to have with A Course in Miracles and working in bookstores and da 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 da, like all these things, right? So not everybody though can go off to college. Not everybody wants to. Not everybody can possibly leave home or leave their hometown. Sometimes you're stuck where you're stuck for whatever reason. You don't have transportation, you don't have money, you don't have support, you don't know where to go, you don't know how to go, whatever. But some of the things that we can simply do to grow our toolkit in our own, when you're just like, hey, I don't have a ton of resources. And I'm like, everybody can get a library card. I don't know if you have to walk to the library. I don't know if you're able to get to the library. Maybe a friend can, like, maybe you can call, find out whatever. Again, but you need to be curious. You need to be willing to step a little outside of your comfort zone to learn new tools, right? But if you cannot leave home, then leave your apartment, leave your house, leave whatever, and go to the library, go to the bookstore, right? Libraries are free. That's the beautiful thing is you can get a library card and reading in libraries. And again, not everybody maybe can read, but you can do books on audio if you can listen, right? And again, there's always nuances and exceptions to all of the things that I might say. So I don't know all the solutions, and I can't possibly in this short amount of time, give you like all the solutions. But what I'm saying is there are ways to help educate yourself, to expand your perspective, to see from other people's point of views. This is what books do is they give us insights into the quote unquote, I'm doing little air quotes, others, right? I often think this. I just think people from different political parties should talk to each other. Straight people should talk to gay people. Black people and white people should maybe have a conversation. People who are all different from each other, people who come from maybe organized religion should talk to some atheists. People who love yoga should talk to people who don't, like whatever. But if we all got curious about each other, if we all got curious about wanting to have more tools beyond just having that one hammer or that one screwdriver or that one set of pliers, right? If we could get curious enough and expand our toolkit, then we could respond more appropriately to the humans in our life, to the situations in our life, to the climate that we find ourselves in right now, you know? And another thing we can do too is talk to, like I just said, talk to people who are different than you. Talk to people who you would normally not talk to. Find out, be curious, expand your perspective. Because again, like I love being a Swiss Army knife. I have now kind of become that. Like I look at my life and, sometimes it's a struggle when it comes to marketing and people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ on a cracker. Because I'm not just one thing. Like my sweetie's like, I'm a musician. And yeah, he's a multi-instrumentalist and he's a singer and he's a songwriter, but he's a musician. When people are like, what do you do? I'm like, oh my God, like, where do I start? I do so many things. So it makes it a little bit harder sometimes. But I love that I have a lot of different skill sets. I love that I'm a podcaster and I'm a writer working on a memoir. And I love that I've been a yoga teacher forever. I love that I do Thai yoga massage, right? Thai yoga body work. I love that I host Right Club every month. I love that I have the Nest, my spiritual mentoring group coaching membership. I love that I work one-to-one with people. Like I love that Reiki, like all the things, just all the things, right? I love that I'm kind of like a little Swiss Army toolkit, right? A Swiss Army knife. And I think for all of us, especially as we get older, because for a lot of people, when they get older, they lock in. They lock in to their way being the only way, to their tools being the best tools, to their way being the right way. You know what I mean? We make our lives and our minds very, very, very small. and it limits our capacity to connect, to have deep relationships, you know? It's like if you just stopped assuming you already knew what your sweetie was going to say, or what you already knew your sibling was going to do, or if you already whatever, if you stop showing up to the party with your one tool, and instead went in and said, my toolkit's a little lacking. I need to expand this toolkit. I need to get more tools in my toolkit, right? So that I can make different choices, so that I can see things differently. So this is an invitation for us to, like, all of us, me too, to kind of look at how we have been kind of like, what's the tool I've been picking up a lot? Is it expectation? Is it assumptions? Right? Is it putting people in boxes? Is it like, oh, I've been using my judgment tool like a wicked lot lately or whatever? You know what I'm saying? And we can get creative and apply whatever we think tools are. There's literal tools, hammers, nails, whatever. There's tools that we use for healing, right? There's tools that we use for what's the word? Like even our bodies. Like a lot of times yoga teachers just think yoga is the one and the only way and it can heal everything. No, it can't. No, it can't. And especially if you're of a certain age, you might want to get some strength training in. That's the other thing. I used to be a personal trainer, right? I used to be a professional organizer. I have dabbled and fucked around and found out, and I have a lot of tools in my toolkit, but I love it because when I am, hired to help somebody, whether it's simply somebody coming to my yoga class or somebody showing up on my mat for Thai yoga body work, which is Thai yoga massage, but in New Hampshire, you have to be very careful, right? So whenever somebody is showing up, if I only knew how to stretch, right, work on people who are wicked flexible, it would totally limit my thing. If I always insist on my yoga class and it's going to be done this way and it's going to be a fast class and it's going to be da 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 da, half the so many people in my class would not be able to participate or keep up. We have to be multifaceted as human beings. We have to do it in our work. We have to do it in our relationships. We have to do it in our relationship with ourselves. We have to do it in our craft, right? We have to. And I think for me, one of the greatest tools that I have in my toolkit is my curiosity. I'm also wicked resilient. I'm also persistent, you know? So there's different kind of tools that we can have, not just physical tools, not just physical skill sets, but it's also how I look at the world. I also can handle a pretty good plot twist. I'm pretty good in an emergency, like whatever it is. So I want to invite you to take a look at your own toolkit and just notice, like, where am I maybe lacking? Like my communication skills aren't so great. I am straight out of patience, right? My patience coffer maybe could be refilled, right? I need a little more toolkit in the patience, slot or zone or whatever. And I like to think of this, I'm a very visual thinker, right? So like some of you may have had grandparents, and double may amen hands if you did, but you might have had grandparents or uncles or aunties or whoever who in the garage or in their basement or in their little workstation or their, what do people have? Their little artist studio in the house, whatever, however you grew up. They might have had either a shelf or a wall, but I'm thinking of the ones like in the old days, those particle boards that had all the holes in them so you could put little hooks in, and people would like hang up their tools and then trace the tools. So if you lent it to somebody or your neighbor took it, you would know when it was missing, like on the wall or whatever, and then you could ask for it back. And it's like, oh yeah, like Marty next door has the hammer or whatever, right? So when you see, right? So I think of it like that. You can literally picture it like you're like one of those red metal toolboxes with the latches, like click, click, and opening them up. Or you could see it like more of a like a tool belt that's around your waist or whatever, however you visualize this. But I'm thinking of the one with the outlines right now, right? A wall toolkit. Imagine looking at that and being wicked honest with yourself and saying, like, what's on my wall? What's missing from my wall? What tools maybe could I use? Because again, if all you have is a hammer, you'll walk around thinking everybody needs to be pounded. And what I mean by that is if you grew up like as a masshole and your solution to everything was to suck it up and stuff it down, when somebody else comes to you with a problem or your child comes to you and they're upset, You don't know compassion, tenderness, mercy, listening, right? Like really hearing them, reflecting back what they just said to you, asking them. Like one of your tools, a really good tool to have is to ask somebody, what do you need from me right now? Do you just want me to listen, or do you want me to help you find some solutions? Right? If you don't have that toolkit, if you don't have that tool in your toolkit, you just think to pick up your hammer and say, suck it up, suck it up. This happens to everybody. You don't know how bad I had it back in the day. Da 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 da. If you bring everything back to you, or you're not able to be compassionate towards their situation, you are lacking some tools, my friend. So we get to take an honest, as they say in 12-step programs, you take a fearless moral inventory. Well, right now we're just taking a fearless and wicked honest, like tool inventory, right? And ask myself, where has my toolbox? Is there an attrition rate, right? Do you have even less tools now as you got older because you started to specialize in something and you really started to drink the Kool-Aid that this way is the only way, or this is how my family has always done it? Because sometimes, right? And if sometimes, if you're somebody who's like, as we call or as it is sometimes called idiot compassion or idiot empathy, right? Where you cut people way too much slack all the time when sometimes they need a little boot in the ass, lovingly, as I always say, loving but firm, right? As I was taught from my teachers, multiple teachers, Ashwaran, one of them, taught me that, loving but firm, because we don't it's not helpful to anybody to let them treat you like shit, to be a doormat. Letting people get away with being total colossal assholes is not helpful to them or to you. So I could just go on and on and on giving different examples, but I think you're wicked smart. I know my listeners are super duper smarty pants, so you're picking up what I'm putting down. But I do think, right? I mean, so much of this podcast is I would love for us to be able to move through the world, right? Move through the world, right? With more confidence and more calm, more creativity, more connection, more compassion, all the things. If you listen to my episode last week about talking to the younger you, I talked about the 8 C's of self, that capital S self. And when you're in your capital S self way of being, all those C's I just said, right? Like there's 8 of them, but like compassion, clarity, confidence, courage, creativity, connection, curiosity. When you're in that state, that calm, then your tools are so much more available to you. But first of all, we got to take a look around and say, do I even have any tools? Do I keep using the old tools? Is it time to update my tools, throw out the old ones, get some new ones, whatever? And then also, again, it's like if you only have a hammer, that's all you're going to ever use. And the person standing in front of you might really need something different. So we have to get curious enough also to pay attention, to lean in, to listen, and then to respond appropriately. And we want to be able to do that to ourselves too, especially when those younger parts of ourselves, right, are needing some of our attention. So I hope this has been helpful in some way. That is always my desire, is that I leave you guys better than how I found you, and that I share something that either, at the very least, I said, at the very least, at least you're entertained. At least you don't get to the end of it feeling like you wasted your time and you had a good time while you were here. So thank you so much for tuning in and listening. As always, if you want to get on my email newsletter list, I don't whatever. On Thursdays, you'll get the podcast right into your inbox. And once in a while, on the other days, I just let you know what's going on, whether there's a new Right Club coming up, or if I have openings for Thai yoga, body work. If, my yoga class is almost always sold out, but sometimes there's a space for somebody to do a drop in once in a blue moon. But whatever I'm up to, right? Joining the nest, any of those things, just go to my website. If you want to get on the email list, though, it's karenkenney.com/sign up. Everything else, just go to karenkenney.com. You'll see it all up in the header. You can navigate to where you want to go. So thank you for being here, you guys. I hope you find yourself being more like a Swiss Army knife or a Leatherman, and that you are expanding your toolkit every day also. And I just appreciate you being here as one of my, maybe you're a loyal listener or maybe you're new. And if you're new here, hi, and thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Okay, you guys, wherever you go, may you leave the animals, the other people, yourself, the planet, and the environment better than how you first found it. Wherever you go, may you and your energy and your attitude and your presence and your love and your curiosity and your Swiss Army knife be a blessing. Bye.